have another child orphaned by this disaster.
The day that changed all of us 20 years ago. Andrea Mitchell, Hallie Jackson on duty at the Pentagon today. Thanks. So discordant again to hear the sound of jet aircraft. Of course, given the Pentagon's location hard alongside National Airport, it is understandable. But on this day of all days, we're joined by a good friend of both of ours, the eminent presidential historian and author, Michael Beschloss. Michael, I have an odd question to begin with, and it may require more time, thought, and attention than we have here. But tell me, is it a dotted line? Is it a red line? How did we get from this event we mark today, this hole in the earth,
sorry about that,
the worst tragedy in modern American history, certainly, to our current times, to the sight of Nazi protesters on the campus of the University Thomas Jefferson, to the sight of our own citizens trying to change the course of a presidential election and ransacking our capital?
Absolutely, Brian. I'll try to do it fast. It's been 20 years that have in many ways been extremely rough. We've had two wars in Afghanistan and Iraq that where American support among the people for those wars ebbed, and the presidents involved were never able to quite explain why we were there and risking American lives and risking American treasure. Another thing is that we felt after 9/11 that our government could not protect us from something that we had been protected from all during World War II and through the Cold War. There was never a direct major attack on American territory. This took us back to the sense of insecurity that Americans had in 1814 when the British came to Washington and burned the Capitol and the White House. But the overwhelming thing that almost makes me cry, and I certainly don't want to long for the world just before 9/11, but that was a world where Americans reacted to the tragedies that we're remembering this day and this heroism with unity. Just like after Pearl Harbor. In 1940, as you know, Brian, and you know, Nicole, Americans were divided right down the middle. Do we fight Hitler or do we not? It was a very bitter political division. But after we were attacked at Pearl Harbor, Americans united, and almost every American said, we now have to get involved in World War II to make the world safe for freedom and safe for American democracy. That's what happened after 9/11, even though we were in the wake of a bitter political division over the contested election between Gore and George W. Bush. If that happened today, 2021, would we see a scene, for instance, that we saw in 2001, which is in the wake of 9/11, Al Gore, who had lost the presidency by a Supreme Court order, many around him felt that it had been stolen from him, nevertheless gave a speech in the wake of 9/11 saying, George W. Bush is my president and I support him. Would Donald Trump and his people say the same thing if, God forbid, there were another 9/11 today?
Michael Beschloss, what do you think is owed to the people standing behind us, reading names in the instances of some of the children that have spoken, of relatives they've never got to meet?
Absolutely horrible. I mean, especially when I remember hearing someone referring to one of the women who was killed and her unborn child. That's what sort of unraveled me. And I remember my own kids who were 7 and 5 that day. Our older boy, Alex, wanted to watch TV, and I yanked all the television cords out of the wall so that he couldn't see it. And so years later, I said, you know, I did that so that you wouldn't be traumatized. He said, well, didn't you know, Dad, I just went over to a friend and saw the whole thing on TV. Didn't quite work. But this is a day that you think about your children. And in the American tradition, the best thing we can do is recall the best of 9/11, and that is, I think, two things. Number one, the heroism of the people on those planes that saved them from crashing into the White House or the Capitol or somewhere else. They really saved at least the symbols of our democracy and American democracy itself. and the fact that in the wake of this tragedy, everyone came together. May that happen again.
Michael, that is the bell to mark the moment of silence that in turn marks the collapse of the North Tower, first to be struck, second to have fallen that morning. 102 minutes, that's right, after the first plane struck.
This was essentially the moment whenever we went as an American citizens towards understanding that we was no longer associated with an accident, that this was being done intentionally towards being an attack. At this particular moment, it resonated in millions of people's lives that this was actually happening and that we was actually under attack. It would have been the same type of emotion, the same type of feeling if we would have been in Pearl Harbor the day that Pearl Harbor was attacked by the Japanese people. It would have been the same emotions, the same type of feelings that went on then as of now. The only difference was now it was being broadcasted live on live national TV that can be seen all over the world versus their event that wasn't. But as far as the feelings, as far as the emotions, they was just as real this time as what they was the last time that we was attacked on our own soil. But the last time we was attacked, it was a military entity attacking another military entity. This time, it was a civilian entity being attacked by a terrorist entity. That's a big difference. But at this moment in time is whenever people's eyes awoken towards understanding we are now under attack.
I never saw myself before you looked at me, before you kissed my lips, before you smiled at me, and I knew that day I would never be alone. And it's the only way. Life never got me low. Tears never broke me down. Inside I always know I'd be by your side, so I'd never be alone. But all that is different right now, and everything's solid with the ground. You'll never be alone.
As I made a video last night and I put it on my YouTube channel, the thing that hurts me the most about 9/11, in which it would have been devastating enough in my particular life, of just the same emotions and the same feelings of everybody else towards it being a horrible, horrible tragedy incident that occurred. But mine goes a little deeper than this, because I was moved by God the Father through the Holy Spirit of trying to warn people, give out advisories about the Arab communities. A matter of fact, in 1991, whenever George Walter Bush decided, I think it was Walter Bush, George Sr., decided he was going to go to war with the Iraqi people. It was my full intent towards going to Washington, D.C., in which I got stopped in Wheeling, West Virginia, towards trying to alert various authorities that they was going to war with the wrong people at that time. And this was 10 years prior to 9/11. I still believe that because of what happened during Desert Storm and Desert Shield, that it stemmed off on a movement that from then on was targeting the American people that led into 9/11, 9/11. Will we ever know the certainty of all these things? Absolutely we will. It may not be in this lifetime. They may cover it up to the extent that they wait for generations of people to die out. But you figure 20 years is a generation. And you would think by now that they'd already done come clean up there in the White House and that they wasn't covering up for other people's mistakes. Kind of like a lie to cover up a lie. And that's exactly what it was. The reason why that it upsets me and it breaks my heart and it just petrifies my soul is because I know the truth and I know that others know the truth, but there's nothing being done at this particular moment in time about the truth. Just like me knowing the truth about that there had to have been more involved with the Oklahoma bombing other than a Ryder truck, Timothy McVeigh and Nichols, and 3,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate that caused that kind of devastation that occurred in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. One day the truth will come out about these matters. One day we will all discover the truth towards who was not doing their jobs pertaining to dereliction of duty and who was siding with the enemy towards burning the candle on both ends. We will know who these people was and who these people are based around the circumstances and based around what that their actions was involved in doing to begin with. And whenever you have a nation, a great nation such as America, to where the very politics that we was putting in power was siding more with the corrupted world than they was the good world, then inevitably you have circumstances that now we're all having to deal with and go through on one level or another. Like I said last night, we didn't have to have deputies in schools back then. We didn't have to have U.S. Marshals. We didn't have to have certain security protocol that was set up like we do today. And yes, these protocols that we've set up is costing the taxpayers that much more money. We have been led astray, going back to the latter part of the Reagans into the Bushes pertaining to the Republican Party. That has caused chaos on every level. Not just with Ruby Ridge, not just with Waco, not just with the Oklahoma bombing, not just with some of the other horrible events that's happened here in America, and especially the horrible events that's happened within the past 2 years pertaining to all the protesting and George Floyd and seeing all the towns being burnt and people being destructive in their protesting and Black Lives Matter and now COVID and now finding out about what that they had done in Afghanistan towards walking away and giving all the artillery back to the enemy. One day there's going to be a reckoning towards how come the very leadership of our leaders have chosen to lead the American people down this path that today the Middle Easterners are just as unstable, if not worse today, than what it was before we ever went to war with them with Desert Storm or Desert Shield. That supposedly that was the reasons why that the Bushes went to war, was to bring stability and to rid the axis of evil from that area. There has been some bad choices made that we're all paying the circumstances for right now, the consequences. And there needs to be some sort of accountability. And I'm not seeing it. Even during something like this right here, unless there's something that's went on that I'm not aware of towards what was said to the general public pertaining to the victims of 9/11.
From Ground Zero in New York over to Shanksville, Pennsylvania, we go. We're going to hear from the head of the Organization of Families of Flight 93 prior to hearing from Vice President Kamala Harris.
Captain Kurtz, Ambassador Kibben, Steve, Superintendent Clark, distinguished guests, families, friends, ambassadors, and all that join us today, near or far. I welcome you to the 20th Remembrance Ceremony of September 11th, 2001, here at the Flight 93 National Memorial. To the men and women that serve aboard the USS Somerset here today, and all of those active duty members and veterans in attendance, near and far, you honor us with your presence. And we must never forget that there are thousands of your brethren gravely injured, or that have lost their lives while serving, or as a result of their service during these past 20 years. Their loss reminds us that September 11th was not a singular event, but a date that marked a cultural paradigm shift in our country and for freedom-loving people across the globe. To the families of Flight 93 here and at home, honoring a loved one, my heart goes out to you. Having lost a brother on September 11th, I too live with a grief that is deep, consuming, and always present. For those that lost loved ones in the terrorist attacks on our country 20 years ago today, you know that we can never move on, but that we must continue to move forward. On September 11th, 2001, we lost a total of 2,977 innocent souls. And that morning, more than 6,000 people were injured in the attack on our country. 2,606 died in the World Trade Center, 125 at the Pentagon, and 246 innocent people were murdered on the 4 hijacked planes, 40 of which were on Flight 93, brought down here in a field just outside of Shanksville, Pennsylvania, as our heroes fought to overcome the evil brought to our shores that morning. To date, an additional 2,000 first responders that took part in the immediate rescue and continued recovery efforts have died from related illnesses. And with every month, we continue to lose more. The ripple effect of September 11th is unfathomable. There are still many questions to be answered about the day, facts to be declassified and released, and justice to be served. So much of September 11th involved pain, loss, and terror. Our lives were never to be the same. And yet, from the ashes of the day, stories of heroism and extraordinary courage emerged, providing hope to a world adrift in fear and confusion. First responders running into burning buildings with little regard for their own safety, while citizens inside those buildings refused to run from danger so that they could offer assistance and comfort to those less able, surely knowing that their decision would cost them all but their honor. And here in the skies over southwestern Pennsylvania, a group of 40 individuals, mostly strangers, when becoming aware of what was taking place on the ground that morning, found the courage to band together at a moment's notice, without regard for political, religious, professional, or cultural differences. Our 40, under extreme conditions, were able to change the course of history, averting the potential of our final image that fateful day being the Capitol dome, collapsed and on fire. the greatest symbol of our democracy in ruins. As the personification of that symbol, our heroes embraced the tenets of democracy that no expression of terrorism will ever extinguish. E pluribus unum. Out of many, one. Our heroes united. They formulated a plan when confronted by a great evil. They prayed. They voted on a course of action, and then they struck. Though in the process they lost their lives, there is no question that they won the first battle in this current war on terrorism. 35 minutes, 9:28 to 10:03 a.m. From the initial terrorist attack on Flight 93 until the moment the plane came down on our sacred ground. A lifetime, a moment, forever, yesterday. Here on the ground, first responders, aware of what was taking place in New York, at the Pentagon, and in the midst of fear and uncertainty, instinctively reacted to the horror that was brought to their rural community in a way that has forever altered their lives. These proud men and women of Somerset County and the surrounding region demonstrated everything that is awesome about the United States of America. Terrorism met rural America, proud, strong, determined. The relationship our families and our nation has forged with this local community is extraordinary. To our extended family here in the Somerset County region, you will forever have our complete gratitude. You have embraced us and the story of our loved ones in a selfless, fiercely protective fashion, even as you continue to move forward, carrying the pain and anguish thrust upon your community 20 years ago. Recently, I was listening to former Congressman Trey Gowdy discussing the ultimate sacrifices made by our men and women in uniform. During his remarks, I was struck by a common theme that I do not recall highlighted in prior years. It was a theme that I felt strongly was consistent with the story of the heroes of Flight 93 and all those we lost on September 11th. I experienced a moment of clarity that brought my understanding of heroism and of sacrifice to an uncomfortable reality, moving me to question who we are as a society. What struck such a nerve was not the annual reminder to honor and remember the thousands of lives ripped from the embrace of their families the morning of September 11th, 2001, including the 40 heroes of Flight 93. But rather the question to be considered is, are we worthy of their sacrifice? Are we worthy? Do we as individuals, communities, and as a country conduct ourselves in a manner that would make those that sacrificed so much and fought so hard on September 11th proud of who we have become? Do we share the same willingness to sacrifice for others in little ways as well as large? To act when necessary for no other reason than to accomplish a noble goal? Egoless, and with no other motivation than to do what is right? Do we cherish the hard-earned freedoms that we enjoy, secured every generation by those willing to stand toe-to-toe with anyone or any country willing to steal them away? The real question that we must all ask ourselves is, have we as a society moved on and left the hard-earned lessons of September 11th behind? Have we become desensitized to what really happened that fateful morning? Have we diminished the courageous actions of these brave men and women, these heroes we honor today at the Flight 93 National Memorial, as well as those in New York City and at the Pentagon, by relegating their stories to the history books? As a country, we shouldn't seek to move on, but rather let us dedicate ourselves to moving forward, honoring and remembering the sacrifices made on September 11th, the lessons we learned, remembering the names, the individuals, and the collective actions of so many that day. Let us be worthy of the selfless sacrifices that were made. Let us remember who we became on September 12th. In the aftermath of September 11th, we saw beyond our differences so that in unity we could survive the devastation of the day. E pluribus unum. Out of many, we became one. That is the inspiration of September 11th. Whether it was in the air or on the ground that morning, heroism was revealed. History was made, and the course of our lives were changed forever. The path we follow is up to us. Let us strive to be worthy of those we lost that morning, our 40 heroes, our loved ones, and the thousands of other innocent lives extinguished that day and in the aftermath of September 11th. E pluribus unum. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordy. An enduring moment in the days after September 11th occurred when President George W. Bush used a bullhorn to speak to firefighters at Ground Zero in New York. His words provided sorely needed encouragement to a grieving country. A common thread of heroism running through each of the 3 attack sites on September 11th was the devotion to duty shown by our first responders. They made the nation proud then, and they continue to do that now. Thank you to all of our first responders across these great United States, for we are truly grateful for your service. I'm greatly honored.
I'm going to weigh in on what he just said, pertaining to my heart's content. I agree that certain heroes should be looked upon as being heroes towards what went on during 9/11. I agree that our men and women in uniform today has prevented another attack similar towards what went on as big or as humongous as 9/11. What I don't agree upon is how come we still admire the very people that let us down that day, that should have prevented this attack from ever happening to begin with. And what my beef is with the law enforcement of today, they want to spend all their resources towards people such as myself that wants to be vociferous in getting my message out to the general public. They want to try to harm or hurt or destroy the ministry that I feel like that God has led me into, and at the same time they continue to let the American people down by allowing for all these attacks domestically to continue to happen that did not happen so much before 9/11. So yes, the world has changed, our country has changed, but it has changed for the worse. Now they can get up there and they can pat one another on the back all they want. They can blow all the smoke that they want. And yes, there were certain people during 9/11 that should be looked upon as being heroic, including the people that sacrificed their lives on this particular airplane ride. Because there's no doubt, if that plane would have met its destination, it probably would have went directly into the heart of the Capitol building. And I can only imagine what that would have looked like by using your imagination towards it blazing a fire and things collapsing and people dying. It would have been an attack upon, then not just an attack upon to the civilian life. It would have been, of course, you got to look at the Pentagon. The Pentagon wasn't civilian life. That's basically attacking the heart of the CIA. But it would have been attack upon to our judicial legislation system that could have dismantled us to the point that we turned on ourselves. And there's a possibility that that's what the original scheme plan was. And if the scheme plan didn't work on number one, they went to the option of number two. Well, we'll take bin Laden and we'll use him for bait, and we'll channel him back over here to this terrorist-known country, and that's where the Americans will devote so much time and energy towards, in which we have. But the bottom line is this: we still did not get the people that originally masterminded and attacked us to begin with, which was the Saudi government, that has been a known entity of financing terrorism going, I guess, back 40, 50 years ago, because they want their Sharia Islamic religion and laws to become dominant in society rather than the Christian society. So in a way, has this turned into a holy war? Absolutely. What can we do about it now? Nothing, but learn from our mistakes and try not to ever make them again.
Now to present our next speaker, the 43rd President of the United States of America, George W. Bush.
I'm really surprised that this guy has the gall of coming back out into the eyes of the general public after all this time has emerged, after all the lives has been sacrificed, after all the horrors has come into our lives since then. I'm really surprised that he would have the nerve to come out and say whatever he's fixing to say. It just shows you how belittling that the American people are towards their patriotic duties, towards identifying that these are basically just empty symbols. These are basically people that are still disguising themselves towards acting like that they shouldn't be held accountable or responsible for not only what all went on then, but what all is going on today. Our country is totally different today than what it was before 9/11. And that's what they continue to keep telling people again and again and again. Well, how come it become this way? Well, you got to go back to his father, in which I know that he knowed what went on, because Secret Service has to alert the families anytime that there's an initial threat to the President of the United States. And they had me marked in 1991 towards me being a threat to the Bush family, that I was on my way to take them out towards being an assassin. So I know that they knowed about me not only then, but I know that they knowed about me towards the 9 tapes that they received in 1980 and 8 while Ronald Reagan was the administration. There's a lot of unforeseen cover-ups here, just like the cover-up out in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, that will be exploited, that will come out into the eyes of the general public. I just don't know when. But that doesn't prevent from me telling my side of the story towards what I know.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Accompanying him today is First Lady Laura Bush, who occupies a special place in the hearts and families of Flight 93. For on September 17th, Mrs. Bush traveled here to offer her condolences, and to those of America to the families and passengers of Flight 93. President Bush is fondly remembered by everyone involved in the effort to commemorate the heroes of Flight 93 for signing the act that created this national memorial on September 24th, 2002. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the 43rd President of the United States, George W. Bush.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you very much. Laura and I are honored to be with you. Madam Vice President, Vice President Cheney, Governor Wolf, Secretary Holland, and distinguished guests. 20 years ago, we all found in different ways, in different places, but all at the same moment, that our lives would be changed forever.
Through grief.
The world was loud with carnage and sirens,
Through terror.
and then quiet with missing voices that would never be heard again.
Because of bad
These
decisions.
lives remain precious to our country and infinitely precious to many of you. Today we remember your loss, we share your sorrow, and we honor the men and women you have loved so long and so well. For those too young to recall that clear September day, it is hard to describe the mix of feelings we experienced. There was horror at the scale of destruction, and awe at the bravery and kindness that rose to meet it. There was shock at the audacity of evil, and gratitude for the heroism and decency that opposed it. In the sacrifice of the first responders, in the mutual aid of strangers, in the solidarity of grief and grace, the actions of an enemy revealed the spirit of a people, and we were proud of our wounded nation. In these memories, the passengers and crew of Flight 93 must always have an honored place. Here, the intended targets became the instruments of rescue, and many who are now alive owe a vast, unconscious debt to the defiance displayed in the skies above this field. It would be a mistake to idealize the experience of those terrible events. All that many people could initially see was the brute randomness of death. All that many could feel was unearned suffering. All that many could hear was God's terrible silence. There are many who still struggle with a lonely pain that cuts deep within. In those fateful hours, we learned other lessons as well. We saw that Americans were vulnerable, but not fragile. That they possess a core of strength that survives the worst that life can bring. We learned that bravery is more common than we imagined, emerging with sudden splendor in the face of death. We vividly felt how every hour with our loved ones was a temporary and holy gift. And we found that even the longest days end. Many of us have tried to make spiritual sense of these events. There is no simple explanation for the mix of providence and human will that sets the direction of our lives. But comfort can come from a different sort of knowledge. After wandering long and lost in the dark, many have found they were actually walking step by step toward grace. As a nation, our adjustments have been profound. Many Americans struggled to understand why an enemy would hate us with such zeal. The security measures incorporated into our lives are both sources of comfort and reminders of our vulnerability. And we have seen growing evidence that the dangers to our country can come not only across borders, but from violence that gathers within. There is little cultural overlap between violent extremists abroad and violent extremists at home. But in their disdain for pluralism, in their disregard for human life, in their determination to defile national symbols, they are children of the same foul spirit, and it is our continuing duty to confront them.
I agree with what he just said, that it is the core of the same spirit that taps in to a demonic, evil entity that now is not just across the pond, but right here amongst us. Could actually be your neighbor down the road. So, in saying that, that means that the church community that was supposed to have driven out these types of temptations and driven out these types of evil demonic spirits, in a sense, have failed, because now we have allowed for the enemy not just to be at the gate, but now the enemy is within the gate. The wolf is in the chicken coop. That's the reason why we're seeing tragedy after tragedy after tragedy right here in the United States of innocent lives that's being destroyed. This atmosphere that I'm talking about did not exist on this level before 9/11. A matter of fact, I can remember as children growing up in school right here in Sharon, Tennessee, in Northwest Tennessee, going to elementary school during the latter part of fall, whenever bird season, pertaining to dove season and squirrel season and rabbit season, and then eventually bow hunting, if that person going to school decided that they was wanting to go do this after class, whenever their last class was over with, they actually put the gun in behind the seat on a gun carrier that you could display and see not only from the back glass, but sometimes from the front glass too as well. And they would go to school, have firearms inside their automobiles, and wouldn't nobody never say a word to them. Because homegrown domestic terrorism, extremist terrorism, did not exist during that time. If you was to do that now towards taking a high-powered rifle or a shotgun and put it in the back end of your glass and pull up into an elementary school or a high school or even a college without proper identification, without proper clearance matters, you would be immediately addressed by whatever type of security system that they had there, and possibly even go to jail for bringing a firearm onto that piece of property. These was the times that we lived in before 9/11. We didn't have to worry necessarily about somebody coming into a church or a schoolhouse or a theater, or somebody busting out a window down in Las Vegas, or somebody going into a nightclub and killing 50 or 60 people. We didn't have to worry about some idiot that got together that decided to make up some sort of a concoction towards going to make up a homegrown dirty bomb like Timothy McVeigh and Nichols. We didn't have to worry about those things. But the atmosphere that we're in today, we have to worry about those things. What has caused this? What has generated this? It wasn't just by the political stance, but it was also by the religious stance that has let the church sector down to the point that now these occurrences that I just got through mentioning are on a day-to-day, everyday occurrence. That's the part that rips at my soul. That's the part that tears my heart to pieces, because I know the before and the after. I know where the failures began, but I still also know that whenever it comes to accountability issues, our leaders is still not standing up to the plate towards admitting where that they have failed. They still want to go around patting one another on the back and commending one another. And we as Americans are, I guess, are supposed to fall prey to their ideology to the degree that oh, we're supposed to pat them and clap for them too. We're supposed to praise them and lift them up like they're some sort of a hero themselves. In other words, they're trying to take their image and distort it with the true heroes in making themselves look like heroes. And the bottom line is this: instead of them looking like heroes, they should be looked upon by society as being nothing more than zeros. They should be looked upon as embedding with the enemy because they failed towards protecting the American people during 9/11. They failed to prevent from those occurrences from happening. Let's listen to the rest of whatever this guy got to say, because these leaders in these positions, regardless whether it's Dick Cheney or whoever, or Mr. Senior Bush, they're going to have a lot on their plate to give an account for one day. I promise you.
After 9/11, millions of brave Americans stepped forward and volunteered to serve in the armed forces.
And they did.
The military measures taken over the last 20 years to pursue dangers at their source have led to debate. But one thing is certain. We owe an assurance to all who have fought our nation's most recent battles. Let me speak directly to veterans and people in uniform.
But then we're going to walk away from a country and give them billions of dollars worth of guns, billions of dollars worth of missiles, helicopters, airplanes, MBs, Humvees, Jeeps, missile launchers. We're basically going to walk away from the enemy and basically hand over all these supplies to him, thinking that he's not going to plan another attack upon the American people's soil or upon the American people. How naive or how crazy is that we have a government that would actually be willing to do this? I love my country. I love my country. But I'm ashamed of my government.
The cause you pursued at the call of duty is the noblest America has to offer. You have shielded your fellow citizens from danger. You have defended the beliefs of your country and advanced the rights of the downtrodden. You have been the face of hope and mercy in dark places. You have been a force for good in the world. Nothing that has followed, nothing, can tarnish your honor or diminish your accomplishments.
Today, now, pertaining to our military, towards them taking action. But how about the men and women that was serving under the military before 9/11 that allowed for 9/11 to happen? How about our police force? How about our FBI? How about the people that was supposed to have been protecting us then? And now we've seen it grow in the intensity that now we have domestic terrorism, the same as we have international terrorism. Wow. Talk about deviating from the truth. Talk about not calling a duck a duck. I realize that this is a time to reflect, and this is a time to look at our heroes and to give them the praises, and to look at the people that sacrificed the ultimate sacrifice towards never forgetting what that they have achieved and done during a time that they didn't have to do it. I understand all that. But I still understand the fainted images, the smoke screen views that our government officials is still putting out to the general public towards accountability issues. How come 9/11 occurred? What was in behind it? How come the decisions was made pertaining to Saddam Hussein that made a threat to this man's father? And if the truth be known, that was the primary reason why they went to war pertaining to Desert Storm and Desert Shield, was because they was basically like a bunch of apes sticking their chest out. We'll show you, we'll show you. And as they went over there and messed up those people's property and messed up those people's lives, there was a blood grudge, a vendetta that was created out of the stem of terrorism. Well, you know what? If you walk up and you shake the beehive and then you get stung, whose fault is it? Whose fault is it that you walked up and you hit the beehive? It's our fault. It's the person's fault that hit the beehive. And now it has exploded into the things that it has exploded into, pertaining to now terrorism being worldwide. That's what we have to admire out of the Bushes going into the latter part of the Reagans. And to think that this man's going to get on stage and to try to create this fake facade? Come on. I have all the respect in the world for the victims of those that died and perished during 9/11 and those that died after 9/11 pertaining to the sicknesses and the illnesses that they had to go through because of 9/11. I have all the respect in the world towards our military, towards what that they have achieved and sacrificed in the past 20 plus years. But it was because of the orders that come out of the head upper epilage, high-ranking government officials, that I don't have respect for. The government leadership, the head leadership of this country are the ones that not only I don't have respect for, or that I am ashamed of, but others too as well. So we sit and we listen to the same old, you know what, coming out of the same old people. When will this end? When will they ever come clean? They probably won't, not in our lifetime. But one day, they will come clean. They will give an account for what that they have done towards allowing for these occurrences to happen in innocent people's lives.
To you and to the honored dead, our country is forever grateful. In the weeks and months following the 9/11 attacks, I was proud to lead an amazing, resilient, united people. When it comes to the unity of America, those days seem distant from our own. Malign force seems at work in our common life that turns every disagreement into an argument, and every argument into a clash of cultures.
How come we didn't shut our borders down, Mr. President? How come we did not respond as a government entity here in America the same way that our ancestors did whenever they was attacked at Pearl Harbor? How come we didn't immediately go and start gathering up people and put them in foreign camps and trying to realize where our true footing was pertaining to the international community? How come we didn't respond in the way that our ancestors responded shortly after 9/11? The fault falls upon their feet, and Cheney's feet, and the Pentagon's feet. That's where the fault falls upon. And now they're trying to do this heroic thing towards mixing the people's minds up towards who actually deserves to get the credit pertaining to the United States military of how that they have sacrificed since 9/11 versus now trying to wash themselves in that same category of being praised and looked up to. Well, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it because I know what went on. And I'm not going to praise somebody that has not done an adequate job in protecting us from foreign as well as domestic terror that has now infiltrated the vast majority of our TV sets to the point that on a day-to-day level we have to experience and witness the same terror happening to ourselves right here in America that did not exist before 9/11. I'm not buying into this because you're still not being accountable to the American people. You never have been, and you probably never will be.
So much of our politics has become a naked appeal to anger, fear, and resentment. That leaves us worried about our nation and our future together. I come without explanations or solutions. I can only tell you what I've seen. On America's day of trial and grief, I saw millions of people instinctively grab for a neighbor's hand and rally to the cause of one another. That is the America I know. At a time when religious bigotry might have flowed freely, I saw Americans reject prejudice and embrace people of Muslim faith. That is the nation I know. At a time when nativism could have stirred hatred and violence against people perceived as outsiders, I saw Americans reaffirm their welcome to immigrants and refugees. That is the nation I know. At a time when some viewed the rising generation as individualistic and decadent, I saw young people embrace an ethic of service and rise to selfless action. That is the nation I know. This is not mere nostalgia. It is the truest version of ourselves. It is what we have been and what we can be again. 20 years ago, terrorists chose a random group of Americans on a routine flight to be collateral damage in a spectacular act of terror. The 33 passengers and 7 crew of Flight 93 could have been any group of citizens selected by fate. In a sense, they stood in for us all. The terrorists soon discovered that a random group of Americans is an exceptional group of people facing an impossible circumstance. They comforted their loved ones by phone, braced each other for action, and defeated the designs of evil. These Americans were brave, strong, and united in ways that shocked the terrorists, but should not surprise any of us. This is the nation we know. And whenever we need hope and inspiration, we can look to the skies and remember. God bless.
And all those things that he just got through mentioning, I agree with, towards giving due credit where credit is due. But once more, it's the leadership, it's the top epilogue. It's the people that are trying to blend off into these heroic affairs that don't deserve to be blended off into them. These are the people that should be held accountable and responsible towards what happened to begin with. And I guarantee you, in other parts of the world, other people that have similar type democracies as we do, if this was to have occurred over in their country, they would have immediately drug their leadership out and demanded answers pertaining to why you ever allowed for these occurrences to happen to begin with. See, that's the difference between them and us. Today, the American people takes it on the cheek and just keeps going. And we're supposed to accept whatever that our leaders tells us. And we're not supposed to do nothing about it after we realize that they're lying to us or that they have deliberately led us down a bad path. This is the reason why America has weakened. Yes, we have good, sound, strong people in this country that holds dear to their patriotic duties. And because of that, this was an illustration. The day of this airplane in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, that got taken down to prevent it from winding up in the Capitol building.
Mr. President, for those beautiful, insightful words. You know, President.
And I realize whenever I jab at our leadership, those are not considered positive words of embracement. And they're not recommended to be. They're not supposed to be. And if you can't handle the truth pertaining to what went on, then I'm not the one with the problem. It's obviously the interpreter or the viewer that is listening to this that's got the problem, because now you want to judge me because of the way that I have perceived what went on and how it went on and what shouldn't have went on. In other words, I'm the one that's deciphering it, cutting it up in little bitty pieces to where the people can understand it, that basically we was bamboozled by our own people right here in our own country. But if you sit and eat all this up, you'll be praising the leadership that caused this type of damage in people's lives, just like you're praising the heroes that deserve to be praised at Shanksville, Pennsylvania, on the airlines. You see how they're mixing and matching? You see how they're wiggling and turning, and it's all about trying to not be accountable for what actually occurred to begin with. And how the American people can't see that, it's frightening that we are not smart enough to realize what our own leadership has done and is still doing to this day towards not protecting us and taking care of us. Now, we haven't had another event as big as 9/11, but look at all the other little events. Look at the event down in Orlando, Florida. Look at the event with the guy that went into the church down in South Carolina. Look at the event in Vegas. Look at the event in this various schools and colleges and theaters. Look at the event that recently happened down in Florida to another school. These are all black marks against the people that we have taken upon to ourselves towards saying, you know what? Here's the badge. Here's the gun. Now you do your job. You take care of us. Have they done this? Have they done this on the level towards us having a safe environment to live in? I'll let you be the judge of that. No, we hadn't had nothing as big as 9/11 that's occurred, but look at all the other small events that's happened. I got a monument right out here in the corner of my property that commemorates those type of people that have went through these type of similar sacrifices because of lack of leadership towards people not doing their jobs as far as dereliction of duty.
Bush and Mrs. Bush have visited here several times. And we are delighted, of course, to have them with us here today, now that the memorial has been completed. The design for this memorial, which so beautifully frames this site, is the work of Paul Murdoch Architects. A deeply felt thank you to Paul and Melina Murdoch, who are with us here today, and to their entire team for envisioning the memorial that has literally sculpted the landscape in an unforgettable manner, and which will be visited by millions of people for generations to come. Once again, thank you to Paul and Melina.
So, Nicole Wallace, we have heard from your former boss in a speech that I think will bear a second reading.
Yeah, I think that was the Nation I Know speech. I think it was important for him to acknowledge that the decisions that he made will be debated. He understands that better than anybody. Anyone who thinks he doesn't would be mistaken. I think he also rebuked the nativism in which this country is still experiencing spasms. He talked about extremism. He talked about the America he knows being one that reached out to immigrants and rejected nativism and rejected prejudice. And I think those are important words for everyone to hear and for anyone to say on a day like today.
Take on, if you care to, if you dare, the question I asked Michael Beschloss. Explain to me, and you've had this unique career, having worked for 43, but also these last couple of years could not have a more front row seat in what we've become. because working for cable news. How did we get from this to 1/6?
Well, I think a lot of people believe that the wars that this country entered into were mistaken. That isn't the president's view. I interviewed Condoleezza Rice. That isn't her view. And I think another thing the president just said was that for the men and women who have served, make no mistake, you have kept us safe at home. I pursued a strategy of dealing with threats where they gather. President Obama continued many of those policies. It's unclear what President Trump wanted to do. This president ended the war in Afghanistan. So I think it's foolish to ignore the toll that has taken on the country's psyche, on our resources, that as a path after this trauma, maybe it was incomplete, but I think it was a huge part of it. You'd have to be blind not to acknowledge that. I think when he was talking about the forces of nativism and isolationism, you have to add racism. And I think that modern Republican parties have always had to keep a boot on the forces of racism. And I think that he sought to. I think those forces flourished under Donald Trump, who was the next Republican president after George W. Bush. I think when you see the ugly intersection of racism and isolationism and nativism, that's how we live in a country now where the greatest risk of anything like that happening again, as you say, comes from within.
Are we numb, or does it in fact shock you that the immediate past president is not a part of any of this today?
I would
Now keep in mind what they're talking about right now, these news commentators, okay? We have recently had January 6th of an erection where a bunch of people come together and tried to force their way in hanging the vice president and the Speaker of the House and basically taking charge of this country. Has our military prevented another 9/11 attack? Yes, they have done so elegantly, pertaining to airplanes being turned into missiles. But on the other hand, we can see the failure that was created by the Capitol Police that led down to the military not being called upon quick enough, of another failure that happened just as of about 9 months ago. Now, I'm not delirious or delusional. I'm not trying to be a smart aleck. I'm calling black, black, and white, white. If it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck. So in actuality, what these commentators are doing, they're actually only telling part of the truth about our military that I agree, out of their sacrifices, deserve to be honored. And I agree that the people in Pennsylvania that made these sacrifices deserve to be honored. And those that perished during 9/11 deserve to be honored. But they're not calling the whole thing the way that it needs to be called. They're only calling parts of it correctly, and the other part they're hoping that it will slide through to the degree that people like me won't notice it and we won't make a video of it. Well, I'm making a video of it, and I'm discovering what they're doing and how that they're doing it towards not telling the truth, nothing but the truth, the whole truth, so help me God, to the American people. And the American people is tired of this. These half-truths, these sided inlines towards these smoke screens, towards people trying to get praise whenever they should be reprimanded in with the people that does deserve to get the praise. They're not telling the full story, is what I'm saying, with these media commentators that get on TV and say the things that they say to the general public. Why don't they do that? I'm going to tell you why. Because the politicians of today is so embedded with our media, top-notch medias, that if they was to get up there and talk to you the way that I'm talking to you right now, they would probably be seeking employment elsewhere. They would suffer the consequences for telling the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help us God. Kind of like me going to Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and discovering that there had to have been something else in the building that created two seismograph events that to this day the Oklahoma authorities cannot verify or give an account for towards how that occurred. America is going to have to wake up to this type of ideology because they're treating us like we're idiots, and we're supposed to buy this hook, line, and sinker towards how that they're expressing themselves about various people and various situations, and we know that they're only telling half-truths in a lot of these situations.
Anything to learn how to become to all that I feel about our politics and all that I feel about the office of the presidency and all that I feel just sitting here makes me cry. But I think that the last occupant of the Oval Office not being here is probably a good thing, regardless of where you sit on the ideological spectrum, because it's never about anybody else. And this can't be a day about any politician.
And as I said, keeping on brand, he's calling a fight tonight.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know what the people in that world think of that. I think we have to remember that there are a lot of places where his presence is welcome. I hope that's one of them. I don't know enough about that world. I think, you just look at the humanity we've been witness to today, and to lose your son and form, an organization with resilience in its name, to bring together people who can help you navigate PTSD, to hear from firefighters who rushed down to this horrible crime scene, the site of a terrorist attack, knowing that very soon after they got there, it really wasn't a rescue mission at all. To see Presidents Obama and President Clinton and President Biden try to hold this city and this site up with their presence, and then to see, but the Vice President's going to speak in a moment here, and former First Lady Mrs. Bush and George W. Bush. I mean, this is who we are. We're a country who suffered this incredible injury, and I'm not sure we've ever really processed it properly. But I think that we are where we are in our politics because the good that came of that day is very rarely in focus other than on its anniversary. And the bad, we were sort of left to our own devices to process that and react to that. And I think that the truest thread to follow is this penchant to blame someone. I think that's what George W. Bush is getting at with this sort of reflex for nativism. And to say that we resisted it after 9/11, but we're hostage to it now, isn't an overstatement, and really probably is one of the great tragedies.
Will 43's words today get traction?
Now, what she just said, I agree with. She finally spoke the truth. That we are held hostage to it today.
Will they be heard?
I think a lot of our viewers at our network, to be blunt, are pretty skeptical of what he has to say because of their feelings about the two wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. I think a lot of Republican voters are attracted to the last occupant of the Oval Office. But I do think George W. Bush speaks to a middle that maybe doesn't always have a voice and a presence and a candidate in every fight. But I do think there's resonance with his view on history and his view on this day.
I'm told the Vice President of the United States is starting.
Madam Secretary, and the President of the Families of Flight 93, Gordon Felt. It is truly an honor to be with all of you at this field of honor. We are joined today, of course, by the family and friends of the 40 passengers and crew members of Flight 93. And we stand today with all those who lost someone on September 11th, 2001, and in the aftermath of the attacks. So many in our nation, too many in our nation, have deeply felt the passage of time these last 20 years. Every birthday your loved one missed. Every holiday. Every time her favorite team won or his favorite song came on the radio. Every time you've tucked in your children or dropped them off at college. You have felt every day, every week, and every year that has passed these 20 years. So please know your nation sees you, and we stand with you, and we support you. We are gathered today on hallowed ground, at this place that has been sanctified by sacrifice, to honor the heroism that the 40 passengers and crew members showed in the face of grave terrorism. I remember when I first learned about what happened on that fateful flight. What happened on Flight 93 told us then, and it still tells us, so much about the courage of those on board who gave everything they possibly could, about the resolve of the first responders who risked everything, and about the resilience of the American people. On this 20th anniversary, on this solemn day of remembrance, we must challenge ourselves, yes, to look back, to remember, for the sake of our children, for the sake of their children. And for that reason, we must also look forward. We must also look toward the future. Because in the end, I do believe that is what the 40 were fighting for. Their future and ours. On the days that followed, September 11th, 2001, we were all reminded that unity is possible in America. We were reminded also that unity is imperative in America. It is essential to our shared prosperity, to our national security, and to our standing in the world. And by unity, I don't mean uniformity. We had differences of opinion in 2001, as we do in 2021. And I believe that in America, our diversity is our strength. At the same time, we saw after 9/11 how fear can be used to sow division in our nation. As Sikh and Muslim Americans were targeted because of how they looked or how they worshiped. But we also saw what happens when so many Americans, in the spirit of our nation, stand in solidarity with all people and their fellow American, with those who experience violence and discrimination, when we stand together. And looking back, we remember the vast majority of Americans were unified in purpose to help families heal, to help communities recover, to defend our nation, and to keep us safe. In a time of outright terror, we turned toward each other. In the face of a stranger, we saw a neighbor and a friend. That time reminded us the significance and the strength of our unity as Americans, and that it is possible in America. So, moments from now, we will leave this hallowed place, still carrying with us the pain of this loss, this tremendous loss. And still, the future will continue to unfold. We will face new challenges, challenges that we could not have seen 20 years ago. We will seize opportunities that were at one time unimaginable. And we know that what lies ahead is not certain. It is never certain. It has never been.
It is certain. It is certain to the extent of what the conglomerates has went into our homeland and created. And I'm gonna bring this out to the American people. And what she's talking about is fine. She's doing a great job in saying the things that she's saying. But what I'm talking about is whenever people no longer started acting like people in America towards being there for one another and with one another in case of an emergency. Now today the Amish and the Mennonites still abide by that neighborhood type generosity, that if their barn gets tore up during a storm or if a house gets burnt, everybody pulls together in that neighborhood towards taking care of that person, because they don't want to lose that person in their community, because then they got a loss. Well, today we don't no longer have to depend upon each other. The big conglomerates has come in with all their fancy insurances telling us, oh, we'll take care of you. We'll accommodate you. We'll take the place of being neighborly to you. All you got to do is sign the dotted line, continue to make your payments pertaining to your policy, and we'll be there for you. The thing about it is, they're not there for us whenever a major event happens, regardless whether it's Hurricane Katrina or another major event. They're not there for us. And because they're not there for us, as far as I'm concerned, the majority of the insurance companies are nothing more than a scam. Because they protect who they want to protect, they insure who they want to insure, and they penalize the people that they want to penalize. I'm going to use my insurance just for an illustration. I haven't gotten a ticket in several years. There's only one insurance, and I can't remember the name of it, and I'm not rooting for this particular insurance company that I'm talking about, but there's only one insurance that I know of that rewards you for doing good towards being a safe driver out there on the road. All the other insurances don't do that. But I tell you, one of the things that they do, if you do get a ticket or if you are involved in an accident, they might do the covering, but at the same time, they're going to turn around and penalize you and punish you because of it. Now, what kind of a daggum scam is that? That was the whole purpose for you getting involved with this company and towards you making the payments that you was making all along. And I'll use this for an illustration. The people down in the lower part of Mississippi that had 40, 50-year policies that had never turned in a claim, all of a sudden needed those insurance companies to be there to take care of their backs. And they failed them because they come up with a lie and saying, oh, y'all didn't have water insurance. You didn't have flood insurance. They didn't have flood insurance. But yet, no, it was a Category 4 or 5 hurricane, Katrina, that created the 25, 30-foot wall of water that caused the damage to begin with. See, whenever you have all these different inadequacies, it creates an environment of hostility. And that's exactly what we got right now because of the conglomerates that's made a promise to us that they're going to be a replacement for our good Samaritan neighbor. But then again, whenever something big happens, they let us all down. They let the whole community down. And then, of course, the brunt of the blow goes upon to the taxpayers towards Uncle Sam, the federal government having to step in and take care of the people that the insurance companies promised to take care of but wouldn't take care of. I think the insurance companies myself is part of the main reasons why that our infrastructure here in America has been torn apart. Because at one time, and I just talked about this about a day ago with some people over in Kenton, Tennessee that I know, but at one time, whenever somebody got hurt, somebody got sick, somebody died, you could rely upon your neighbor to be there. And I'm just not talking about the people that you associate with as far as a church, your church neighborhood. I'm talking about the neighborhood in general. It has been torn completely apart to the point that now somebody can die right up the road from me, less than a quarter of a mile, that I've known for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And I won't hear about their death until maybe a week, 2 weeks after they've hauled them off and buried them. We're no longer connected in the ways that we was connected before the conglomerates come in and lied to us and took our lives over, pertaining to the big insurance scams that now that we can see from the inside out. They want to punish us for doing wrong, but they don't want to reward us for doing good. Now, how fair-minded is that pertaining to your insurance company that you're associated with, regardless whether it's home insurance, car insurance, life insurance, or medical insurance? How fair-minded is that? It's not. It's a scam. It's a lie. It's a fraudulent persona that has created not only an atmosphere of dislike, but it has created an atmosphere towards now one another are at one another's throats. Instead of us being the good Samaritan neighbor that we're supposed to be, we've turned on each other. We don't care what goes on down the road a quarter of a mile away towards old Joe dying. Probably needed to die anyway, right? Is the way that a lot of people look at it. It's created an environment of hate to the point that we no longer love our neighbor as ourselves. But now the insurance companies are supposed to take care of that problem for us. But they have failed us. That system has failed here in America. And I hope to God that the same system does not inundate all the other countries all over the world, because if it does, it's going to turn this world into a more crummier place than what we're looking at today. Let's say 25, 30, 40, 50 years from now, after I'm dead and gone, it's sure enough going to have a profound effect upon how people treat one another and how people accommodate each other pertaining to catastrophes and being cordial towards each other as far as being that good Samaritan neighbor.
But I know this. If we do the hard work...
And it shouldn't take a catastrophe like this before people put down their guard and they start treating one another again like neighbors. It shouldn't take COVID, a pandemic, before people are realizing that we need each other as a unit, of being one, of being united. It shouldn't take a catastrophe like this to do that.
Of working together as Americans. If we remain united in purpose, we will be prepared for whatever comes next. The 40 passengers and crew members of Flight 93, as we all know, they didn't know each other. Most of them didn't know each other. They were different people from different places. They were on that particular flight for different reasons. But they did not focus on what may separate us. No, they focused on what we all share, on the humanity we all share. In a matter of minutes, in the most dire of circumstances, the 40 responded as one. They fought for their own lives and to save the lives of countless others at our nation's capital. After today, it is my hope and prayer that we continue to honor their courage, their conviction, with our own. That we honor their unity by strengthening our common bonds, by strengthening our global partnerships.
And I'm going to weigh in on this because what she just got through saying I agree with. But the fact of the matter is, any culture, or a mixed culture that's under the same circumstances pertaining whenever the chips are down, hopefully would have done the same as they done towards realizing that they was trying to spare lives, even in sacrificing their own. So it's not just the American spirit that she's talking about. She's actually talking about the human spirit. She ain't talking about the American spirit, because any culture under the same circumstances would have done the same. Or I would like to believe that they would have. Once the chips is down and you realize that you really don't have a choice in this matter. I mean, it's been forced upon to you either independently or initially as a group, And now you got to deal with what you got to deal with because these are the circumstances that you're dealing with. You got to call it like it is. And I don't mean to be any type of bad news barrier. I don't want to get up here and talk and show non-empathy or sympathy towards anybody. But you got to tell the truth about the truth if you're going to work your way out of this scenario that has been brought upon to us by various evil demonic people and various conglomerate people that have come in here and warped and destroyed the American culture. See, at one time, throughout the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and the majority of the 60s, until the women started standing up towards demanding for their rights, the man was the primary sole breadwinner of the family. And the woman stayed at home towards keeping the house tidy, keeping the children fed and clothed, and making sure that they got proper education. That whole structure of our normalcy has been divided, tromped upon, and split apart to the point that now, if two parents that has a child or two, if they're not both working, odds are they're not going to be able to make ends meet. Who has presented that temptation in front of society? The banking industry. Oh, come on, buy it now and pay for it later. Buy it now, pay for it later. In other words, they took the bait and they twirled it in front of the people, and the people went for it, and they went out here and tried to live above their means, buying a house for $200,000 whenever they probably could have got by with a $150,000 or $125,000 house, buying an automobile for $40,000 whenever they could have got by with a good secondhand automobile for $20,000. It's the banking industry, it's the finance industry that has taken a part too towards corrupting society the way that it has towards, oh, buy now, pay later, buy now, pay later. Well, see, you got a lot of people out there now that's buying now and they know good and well that they ain't going to pay later. You know who's going to pay? The taxpayers, because they're going to turn around, declare bankruptcy up onto their home or their car over various circumstances. And it will the brunt of the blow will be put up onto the backs of the taxpayers towards the taxpayers paying for it. So you can't just look at one entity that's been a contributing factor towards breaking down the human culture over here in America from the way that we used to be versus the way that we are now. But you got to look at all of them. You got to look at all of them. You know, there was a time back in the early 1900s, and I guess up until the mid 1900s, to where you could actually go to a smaller town doctor and he would basically be your doctor that took care of your toe needs, took care of your ear needs, took care of your colds, took care if you was cut, took care if you broke a bone. And now all that's changed too. Now we've got all these specialists that specializes in ears, specializes in toes, specializes in broken bones. Which I'm not saying that some of that in and of itself from a medical perspective isn't good. Because it probably is towards having a specialist that knows his specialty in that field. But there was a time whenever you went to the doctor's office, and if you didn't have money to pay, you paid in other means, such as eggs and chickens. And there was a time that if you did have to go to the doctor, it was affordable. Not nothing in comparison today, that whenever you go to a doctor, and let's say you were involved in a major accident, and you wind up with $250,000 bill or a $500,000 bill, and the next thing you know, they've done foreclosed on your cars and foreclosed on your homes, and now you become a homeless person. You're out here walking around like a hobo or a tramp towards having one lifestyle one day versus another one the next. So where does all this end pertaining to the rich dominating the poor? And that's exactly what's happened here in America. It used to be three classes of people. It used to be the rich class, the middle class, and the poor class. Now it's just the rich class dominating the poor class. We don't no longer have the middle class because there ain't no promises of the middle class because of all the injuries that we've taken on. And if people ain't wise enough to see that and identify that, that's not my problem, that they haven't interpreted this in the correct form. And you can blame me and call me the bad news bearer if you want to, but in actuality, I'm trying to actually help the people that listen to this program or listen to this particular documentation that I've documented today in honor of the 9/11 victims.
And by always living out our highest ideals. This work will not be easy. It never has been. And it will take all of us
commitment,
believing in who we are as a nation. And it will take all of us going forth to work together.
But it's also going to take some sacrifices from these major conglomerates that have gotten wealthy and rich off of the backbone of the American people. Call it like it is. It ain't just one sector of people that has to continue to sacrifice again and again and again pertaining to the poor class or the working class. And that's exactly what the system is trying to do right now, which is very unfair to the millennial people that's growing up. That's basically 30, 35, 40 years and younger, because now this burden has been put upon to them towards a $30 trillion indebtedness, and the system hadn't changed to the degree that if you're still caught up in a major accident and they're picking the pieces up, you're still going to wind up with $250,000 to $500,000 hospital bill that if you don't have the right type of payments for, they're going to come and take basically the ring off of your wife's finger. They're going to clean house. They're going to foreclose on everything that you've ever owned. And you tell me that's fair? No wonder we got bullets flying up in Chicago. No wonder we got all these homegrown terrorists going on. Because society looks upon to society as it being corrupt and unfair. And whenever it comes to them having a future, they know that they don't have one. Other than to get out here, steal, borrow, and beg. Well, what kind of life is that? What kind of life is being a homeless person out on the streets that he or she can't do no better for themselves? It ain't one. That's my whole point. The conglomerates, the 1%ers, are destroying the 99%ers. And until the 99%ers decide to unify, and until the 99%ers decide to do something about these 1%ers that has brought this type of injustice into our lives, we're going to continue to struggle, be hurt, be damaged. We're going to continue to be destroyed by the richest of the rich and the powerful of the powerful. And that's basically the bottom line. Yes, the people that sacrificed so much sacrificing during and after 9/11 deserve our fullest admiration and honor. But all the rest of these people that have made the wrong choices for us all, they need to be held accountable.
Thank you all. May God bless you, and may God bless America. Thank you.
We're going to end this particular program right here, and we're going to go to something else real quick and see what else that they got pertaining to a flyby here.
Your segment on your broadcast, and I were members of the National Commission on Terrorism. I'm the only one who was out of Congress first, but then back in Congress while that happened. And we predicted a major attack on U.S. soil. And just the day before, 9/10/2001, I had lunch with the chairman of the commission, and we were lamenting the fact that no one was paying attention to our recommendations. We had testified before congressional committees. We had had other public events to try to get people to focus on this thing. But on that morning, just to amplify what Anita was saying, I was walking toward the dome of the Capitol because that is where the Intelligence Committee rooms were. I was a co-chair of a special subcommittee of the Intelligence Committee on terrorism with Saxby Chambliss, who became senator later, but then was a congressman. And we were going to meet in the dome of the Capitol. If that plane had not gone down in Shanksville, most people think it by this time, or close enough, would have hit the dome of the Capitol. We had no evacuation plan in Congress. At least 150 members were milling in front of the Capitol once it was closed. By the way, that outraged me because I thought, how can we close the Capitol of the United States when we members take an oath to provide the common defense? But it was closed for our safety, and there we were. And there would have been a major continuity of government issue if that plane had hit the Capitol, and probably half the House and Senate would have been eliminated at that point. And we still don't have adequate measures. We still don't have to make sure, we saw this on January 6th, to make sure that we protect our government against catastrophic events like an insurrection.
That's a good point. Anita, go back 20 years. How did the attacks change then President George W. Bush?
Well, it defined his presidency from that day forward. Every president, as we know, takes an oath to preserve the Constitution, protect the security and the people of the United States. You heard, in his words today, through the shock and the horror and the grief, there was the resolve of the nation to pick ourselves up from this wounded state and to defend our liberty, to defend our way of life. I loved that he gave, the shout out to the veterans who joined in voluntary service, to the nation at that time to defend our principles. They were a force for good because the country is a force for good. And that's what the Bush administration and the Bush doctrine, as you know, because you covered it for 8 years, and Jane knows because she was a defender of our liberty and of our patriotism and the tools that needed to be put in place to protect the country. And that's what our 8 years were. And I will say, in an opportunity to really talk to a lot of my colleagues over a period of a few months, about 50 people from cabinet officers to interns that were in the White House that day and then came back the next day. This was an article for the White House History Journal, for the White House Historical Association, to document what it was like to be there, where they went, and coming back, and what the work was like from September 12th forward.
Yeah, everybody remembers exactly what was going on. Very quickly, Jane, go ahead.
Yes. Just to say, the mantra of the time was America is under attack. We weren't finger pointing. Anita makes a good point. And at the end of that horrible day, the members of Congress who were there once the Capitol reopened stood on the steps, held hands. It didn't matter whether we were standing next to someone of the same party or not. And we sang, God Bless America. It was a moment of unity, I think. I salute George Bush for hailing that today. And Anita McBride played a crucial role too. And let's hope we get that feeling of unity back.
Once more, this is another form of whitewashing accountability issues. What did she say? That there wasn't no finger pointing? That's the reason why that this has unfolded the way that it has, is because there wasn't no finger pointing at the time of 2001 towards the who, the what, the when, and the why. And the people that we should have held accountable and responsible, we basically patted them on the back and told them what kind of good job that they'd done for allowing for this horror to fall up into our lives. Do you think that another country in another land would have done the same pertaining to their leadership? I don't think so. I don't think so. Matter of fact, I know so. I've seen them go into their parliaments and go into their government and literally form a coup or drag the people out that was held responsible and put somebody else in charge that could have protected them and could have taken care of the problem. That's what we have been lacking here in America. And I realize that there's certain guidelines and there's steps to do that towards accountability issues pertaining to our courts and hearings and having debates and being able to talk like I'm talking right now. You can't just go in there like a vigilante mad person and trying to take the law into your own hands towards making these people pay for what they didn't do back then. But I'm just trying to bring out the fact that what this woman to your far right that's wearing the white blouse was talking about, that her administration that she was associated with in the government knew or felt like that there was fixing to be an attack upon to the American people by putting the dots together. It just so happens, because of the lack of unity coming from our government as far as them communicating with each other, that ball got dropped. That ball got dropped. You talk about a day late and a dollar short. Wow, that's a full heads up towards that deal. Because if the right people would have been allowed to have known the truth a day before 9/11, it's a possibility that we could have caught this either at the airplane hangars, or it's a possibility that our U.S. military pertaining to our Air Force could have prevented it from escalating into this of what we have witnessed and been through in the past 20 plus years. We're talking about a group of people that was raised up in the Woodstock era, that had bell bottoms and blue jeans, beads, smoked dope, long hair, hippies, that decided to clean themselves up, put on a nice white shirt, act like that they was intelligent, and go up there and start running the country. The very people pertaining to the Clintons and the Bushes and even the Obamas, the very people that has been associated with our lives for the past 35 or 40 years was the very people that was probably at Woodstock during the time that Woodstock went on. Just so happens they become slick and sly towards being a deception, towards cutting their hair, cleaning themselves up, getting a little bit of education, and now the American people voted them in power. And now the American people ain't holding them accountable and responsible. So it's an endless cycle. It's almost a cesspool of what's going on over here that's really sad, of knowing the stance that we had in America after World War I, and especially after World War II, towards being the predominant nation above and beyond all other nations, globally speaking, internationally speaking, to the point that now we're becoming a third world country. I wonder why. Good luck to all of us as we're fixing to end the program here today in honor of the victims that perished during 9/11 and those associated with 9/11 that wound up going through great horror with diseases and all kinds of other stuff that went on. We salute our first responders. We salute our military. We salute our countrymen. It's the government that we're ashamed of. We're not ashamed of our military. We're ashamed of the leadership of what has occurred for the past 30 plus years that has put us in a very, very precarious, uncomfortable situation that we're all in now, to the point that now, if you're not born with a silver spoon in your mouth towards being the richest of the rich, towards this pick and choose game that they're playing, or if you're not on the right side of the insurance company whenever a catastrophe does hit, your life is liable to be totally over just within a matter of seconds, because you was involved in an accident or a shooting or a hurricane or a flood or whatever. Because we no longer have that good stability pertaining to the working class, the middle class here in America. It's either the richest of the rich towards dominating the poor, the 1 percenters telling the 99 percenters towards what we're going to do and how that we're going to do it. And I just cannot see our ancestry living that way, because that was the very reason why that our militia stood up against the redcoats before the military was ever created in this country, that put an end to such type of tyranny. Stopped it in its tracks. Good luck to all of us. God bless you. God bless America. God bless our endeavors. God bless our military, and shalom.